Back in 2011, when I was 17, my friends and I became obsessed with exploring abandoned places. It started with old factories and empty schools, but eventually we got into abandoned houses out in the country. Most of the time it was just stupid teenage curiosity mixed with boredom. There was one place everyone in town talked about called the Weaver House. Nobody knew who originally owned it. The only thing people agreed on was that the house had been abandoned since the early 90s after some kind of family tragedy. Every version of the story was different. Some people said the father killed himself. Others said the entire family disappeared overnight. Of course, hearing all that only made us want to go there more. One Friday night around midnight, my friend Ethan picked me up along with two other friends, Mark and Trevor. The house sat deep in the woods about 20 minutes outside town. Even finding it felt wrong. There were no street lights out there. Just narrow roads surrounded by endless trees. When we finally spotted the house, it looked worse than I expected. It leaned slightly to one side like it was sinking into the ground. Half the windows were broken, and vines had completely wrapped around the porch railing. The weirdest part was that there were no nearby houses for miles. Trevor immediately started joking around, pretending to be scared. Ethan parked near the tree line and killed the headlights. The second the engine shut off, the silence hit us. No bugs, no wind, nothing. I remember that clearly because it felt unnatural. We grabbed flashlights and headed toward the porch. Every step made the old wood creak loudly beneath us. The front door was already cracked open about an inch. That should have been our first warning. Inside, the house smelled awful. Not like something dead exactly, more like mold and standing water mixed together. The living room still had furniture in it, a couch, a lamp, even family photos hanging crooked on the walls. That's always the creepiest thing about abandoned houses to me. It feels like people left in the middle of dinner and never came back. Mark started taking pictures while Trevor wandered into the kitchen. I stayed near Ethan because I already wanted to leave. Then Trevor yelled from the other room, "Guys, come look at this." We found him standing in the kitchen staring at the table. There were plates sitting there. Not dusty old plates. Clean plates. One even had what looked like fresh bread sitting on it. The room instantly got quiet. Ethan laughed nervously and said maybe some homeless person lived there, but nobody sounded convinced. Then we heard footsteps upstairs, slow, heavy, deliberate, not the random creaks of an old house. Actual footsteps. We all froze. Another step, then another. Something was moving directly above us. Trevor whispered, "Someone's here." Ethan called out asking if anybody was upstairs, but the footsteps immediately stopped. That silence afterward was the worst part. I remember hearing my own heartbeat. After maybe 20 seconds, Mark suddenly pointed his flashlight toward the hallway. There was someone standing there. At first I thought it was just a coat hanging up, but then the figure moved slightly. It was an old woman. She stood completely still in the darkness, wearing a pale nightgown. Her hair hung down over half her face. Nobody spoke. She slowly lifted one arm and pointed upstairs. Not toward us, upstairs. Trevor instantly panicked and bolted for the front door. The second he ran, the woman sprinted toward the hallway at full speed. I have never seen somebody move like that in my life. Not normal running. It looked jerky and unnatural, almost like her legs barely bent. We all ran out of that house screaming. When we got back to Ethan's truck, Mark realized he left his camera inside. There was no chance we were going back. As Ethan started the engine, I looked toward the upstairs window. Somebody was standing there watching us. Not the old woman. A tall man, completely motionless. And beside him was the old woman again, still pointing upstairs. We sped out of there so fast Ethan nearly crashed into a ditch. The next day Mark begged us to drive back during daylight to get his camera. Against my better judgment, we went. The house was still there. But the weird part, there were no plates in the kitchen anymore. No furniture either. The entire house was almost empty. And Mark's camera was sitting neatly on the front porch. We never went back after that. When I was younger, my cousin Dylan worked security for an abandoned hospital scheduled for demolition. The place had been closed for years after severe water damage and asbestos problems. He used to tell me stories about the building all the time. Lights turning on by themselves, doors slamming shut, voices echoing through empty hallways. I never believed any of it. One night during summer break, Dylan offered to let me and my friend Connor come inside after his shift ended. We were around 18 and thought it sounded fun. The hospital looked terrifying at night. Most of the windows were boarded up, and the giant red emergency sign outside flickered constantly. The parking lot was cracked apart with weeds growing through it. Dylan unlocked a side entrance and told us to stay close because parts of the building were unstable. Inside felt freezing cold. Not normal cold. The kind that immediately makes your skin crawl. We explored for almost an hour. Most of the rooms were empty except for old hospital beds and scattered paperwork. Connor kept trying to scare us by banging on walls and whispering. Then we reached the basement. That's when Dylan stopped joking around. He told us there was one section downstairs he hated checking during night patrols. At the end of the basement hallway was a metal door with no label on it. Unlike everything else in the hospital, this door looked newer. Connor asked what was inside. Dylan shrugged and said he didn't know because it was always locked. As we got closer, I noticed something strange. There were scratch marks all over the outside of the door. Long, deep scratches, like someone had desperately tried to claw their way out. Connor immediately started making horror movie jokes while Dylan unlocked the door. The second it opened, a horrible smell hit us. The room beyond was pitch black except for our flashlights. It looked like some kind of storage area filled with broken wheelchairs and rusted equipment. But there was something else, a sound. Soft humming. At first I thought it was pipes vibrating. Then I realized it sounded human. Dylan whispered, "Do you hear that?" The humming suddenly stopped. Connor nervously laughed and asked if someone else was in the building. Then from deep in the darkness, we heard a woman's voice. Very quietly she said, "Help me." Connor cursed and immediately backed toward the hallway. Dylan kept yelling that if someone was down there, they needed to come out. No response. Then one of the wheelchairs moved. Not rolled, moved. Like somebody shoved it from behind. It slammed sideways into the wall. We all jumped back. That's when our flashlights started flickering. The humming returned, louder this time. I swept my flashlight toward the far corner of the room and saw somebody crouched there. A woman in a hospital gown. Her head tilted at an unnatural angle. I remember Connor whispering, "That's not real." Then the woman stood up impossibly fast and started running toward us. The way she moved didn't even look human. Dylan slammed the metal door shut right before she reached us. A second later, something hit the other side so hard the entire door shook. We ran. Not walked. Ran all the way upstairs. Even after reaching the lobby, we could still hear banging echoing up from the basement. Dylan locked the building and drove us home without saying a word. A week later, the hospital started demolition. Years afterward, I asked Dylan if he remembered that night. He got completely serious and told me something I'll never forget. He said the basement door was never actually locked before that night. None of us ever went near that building again. Back when I was 22, I lived in a cheap apartment complex outside Chicago while working night shifts at a warehouse. The building wasn't great, but rent was affordable. Most tenants kept to themselves, except for the guy in apartment 204. Everyone talked about him. Nobody knew his real name because he never introduced himself. He was this tall older man who always wore the same dark coat, no matter the weather. The weird thing was nobody ever saw him leave, ever. People would see lights on in his apartment at all hours, but nobody remembered seeing him outside the building. At first, I thought people were exaggerating. Then weird things started happening. Late at night, I'd hear footsteps above my apartment around 2 or 3 a.m. Slow pacing back and forth for hours. Sometimes there'd be loud scraping noises like furniture moving across the floor. One night, my upstairs neighbor complained to the landlord, but the landlord looked confused and said apartment 204 was supposed to be vacant. That instantly creeped everybody out. A few tenants argued with him, insisting somebody clearly lived there. The landlord finally agreed to check it the next morning. For whatever reason, I volunteered to go with him along with another tenant named Lewis. When we reached apartment 204, the hallway smelled horrible. Like rotten food. The landlord knocked several times. No answer. Eventually, he unlocked the door. The apartment was almost completely empty. No couch, no bed, nothing. Just stains on the carpet and piles of newspapers stacked everywhere. But here's the part I'll never forget. In the middle of the living room sat a wooden chair facing the front door. And beside it was a dinner plate with fresh food on it. Still warm. Lewis immediately asked if somebody had just been there. The landlord looked genuinely disturbed. We slowly checked the apartment room by room. Empty bathroom, empty kitchen, empty bedroom. Then we noticed the closet door at the end of the hallway. It was slightly open. The landlord called out asking if someone was inside. Nothing answered. He slowly pulled the door open. Inside was another door leading into a tiny crawl space between apartments. And from inside, that darkness came breathing. Heavy breathing. The landlord slammed the crawl space shut instantly and backed away. Then we heard movement inside the walls. Fast movement, like somebody crawling. Lewis started panicking, asking what the hell that was. That's when we heard the voice. Right behind us. A deep voice quietly saying, "You shouldn't be here." We turned around, and standing in the kitchen doorway was the man from apartment 204. I have no idea where he came from. 1 second the kitchen was empty. The next he was there. He looked worse up close. His skin was pale gray, and his eyes looked almost completely black from the lighting inside the apartment. Nobody moved. The landlord finally stuttered that the apartment was condemned and he needed to leave. The man just stared at us silently. Then he smiled. Not normal smiling. Way too wide. Lewis bolted first and the rest of us followed immediately. As we ran into the hallway, I looked back once. The man was still standing there watching us. completely motionless. 2 days later, the landlord boarded up apartment 204 permanently. About a month after that, the entire building was sold and demolished. I still think about that apartment sometimes, especially the breathing inside the walls.